Well, we all are aware of the incredible power of observation. You need to move, yeah. And today I would like you to meet the observer behind the creator. Because what I believe is that behind every act of creation, whether it is in art, science, or design, there is always a very acute observer. And the act of observation, actually, creation actually starts from a very keen observation. I'll take you through a few vivid memories from my childhood where I started this act of observing everyday life, wherein, during the visits to the school picnics with friends or with families, I would start observing the monuments and things around them and get back home and start writing descriptive essays about it. Alongside writing essays, what I used to do was also start sketching from memory. And this extended not only to monuments and people and places, it also extended to everyday objects, which I started noticing very closely and started drawing them to understand the nuances of the products. And as a kid, I was always fascinated at how things are made actually. This inculcated two very interesting aspects in me as an observer. One was the attention to details, and the second was the photographic memory, which I eventually developed over the years, which led me to actually write short stories about objects and everyday life. And I'm really happy to share that I got an opportunity to write short stories for a newspaper called The Statesman in Kolkata, where I used to write short stories about silly things like how do you protect your pen from getting lost if you've given it to someone, if someone has borrowed it from you. Or what if, happens is that what happens is when you, write in the last page of your rough book. So these psychological things and things around everyday objects have always fascinated me. From there, I moved on to Nagpur to pursue electrical engineering. But while I was doing my engineering, I did not let go my keen interest of actually pursuing an alternate career of being a cartoonist. So I started a pocket column called Not As You See in a newspaper called Lokmat Times, wherein I would observe everyday life problems and then write small one-liners. Now, because I was studying, I didn't have much time to write essays and short stories anymore. So it kind of shrunk down to one-liners. So I would make acute observations and write them in just one line. And that's how I started my own pocket column called the Not As You See. One of the incidents which actually completely changed my thought process was I had observed these newspaper boys, while coming back from office, because I was working as a sub-editor also in the night shift at around 8:30 in the evening to around 3:34 in the morning. So while coming back from one of those office hours, early in the morning, I observed these newspaper boys actually rolling up these papers, and they were throwing these papers to different heights of the buildings. I felt that this was a humongous task for them to do, and can I do something? I realized that apart from being a cartoonist and just observing things, I was also pursuing engineering. So I have the technical know-how as well. So that's when I was struck with an idea of a newspaper dispenser, a rather silly idea at that point in time, but it was inspired from the mechanism of a plastic dot pen, ballpoint pen, the on-off mechanism, that when you switch on the pen, you have to press the button, and to release it, you have to again press the other side. So that was the mechanism which inspired the technology behind the silly idea of having your newspaper dispenser. Incidentally, that won me my first design award at a national level college fest called Technodeon, which was a very big impetus for me to seriously consider taking up industrial design, or rather design and innovation, as a future career ahead. Because what I realized was that as a cartoonist, I was observing things and making fun of them. But as an innovator, I would be able to actually provide solutions to the society. And that's when I decided to join National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. I was lucky to get through that. And I did my post-graduation there. And today, after 2 decades of practicing design, I can proudly share that I've designed more than 1,000 innovative products for clients across 20 countries, and have collected, it started from 1, but today it is more than 40 design awards. I strongly believe as innovation by observation, because that's what I realized that I have been doing all this while. So today I'm actually sharing those small observations which I had done to innovate objects. Now, if you see the product on the screen is actually a regular multi-plug. Flat on the top, flat on the bottom, and flat on the front. You would have also seen these 2-pin plugs, but what is the problem which I had observed here? The observation was very simple, that the 2-pin plug would fall off, and it was a nagging problem. And I realized this was happening due to gravity. So can I do something about it? Yes. A very simple thing, I added an angle of 40 degrees and created the first angular multi-plug, and which has now become a standard in the trade if you are manufacturing a multi-plug. What it did was that it suddenly created a gravity lock. So where gravity was the problem, now gravity itself is actually providing the solution. So that's the idea sketch and the prototype, and then it was launched in the market. And over the 2 decades, it's been one of the best sellers actually across the trade. Solutions lie with the problem, and I call that contextual innovation. A very interesting brief from the marketing team of a home appliance company. The brief was, can you increase the height of the refrigerator without increasing the cooling capacity? Now, quite an interesting brief. How do you actually do that? So, as always, I start visiting homes and started observing the context where the refrigerator is actually being used. And I noticed very interesting things. People were using these plastic standees to raise the height of the refrigerator. And another thing which I observed was that these onion and potatoes were stored in these plastic standee baskets. So the observation here was that people were spending a considerable amount of money in buying both the stand to raise the height as well as to store onions and potatoes. Can I do something about it? I combined both these product ideas and created the first utility drawer. That's me with the engineering team in Ranjangaon, and that's the first prototype which I had built for the dry storage, and did the user testing, which is very important to get the actual user feedback. And we refined and fine-tuned the idea, and this was launched as the final product, where if you see the overall height of the product has also increased, and the overall aesthetics is well maintained. So now it doesn't look like a jugaad, like it's not a stand. It has an integrated look. So you have a dry storage which actually performs 2 functions, one of storing the onions and potatoes, and also the initial brief from the marketing team, which was to increase the height of the refrigerator. So now you don't have the furniture to actually keep the television on the stand. So it's on the wall. So where do you keep your DTH box? So these were the observations. So what I realized was that the stand was of no use to the user, but it incurred a cost for the manufacturer because they had invested in the molds and dies and tools for that. So, and also you cannot do away with it, because once you buy the product is incomplete without a stand. So what can I do with it? I converted the stand into a shelf. It took me around 6 months to work out on the mechanism of the locking mechanism of the neck of the stand. And that's me with the mock-up makers in Seoul. And that's how I designed the first television which could go up on the wall, and the stand would be converted into a shelf to actually store your DTH boxes, and was launched in the Indian market and stated that it is designed for India. Childlike imagination stems from childlike observation. What I exactly mean by this is that you need to observe without distortion. You need to see things as they are. I'll cite a few examples. You see the kid actually pointing out to a garbage bin and saying that why does it have to look like a penguin? Why do we have to treat animals in this manner? This is a very simple observation, but it is as it is. It is not colored with any other thought. As a child, you have to see things. Or why do you have to, in today's day and age, why do we have to actually, memorize things when we can just Google up certain things? Or can we have a simplified menu? Because when we go to a place and we try to order a very simple thing, we are fumbling through the entire list of menus, and these are real-time issues. And as a child or a childlike observation, you can see these things. As a creator, I think I'm a lifelong observer, because it starts and ends with observation with me. Every idea I've worked on, it actually started with a very keen observation. And along the way, when I was designing these 1,000 plus products, I also came across situations which were really humorous. For example, this situation where you can find me, or rather anyone of you would experience this. If you're married, then with your wife or with your girlfriend, you will be going shopping, but you don't have any spot to actually sit. You're just carrying the bag, but you have no place to sit. So what I feel is that these kind of observations are actually your triggers for imagination. So, for example, another example. If you see this, we are always told when the floor is freshly mopped that please don't put your footprints over it. Now this also works like a trigger for me, because I'm an innovator. And anyone out here in the audience who wants to be an innovator, these observations can act like triggers. For example, can we design a floor which does not leave footprints? So why not have anti-impression tiles? How about looking at it from a different perspective? You see a AC also there in the image. So that can trigger a thought that can we design an air conditioner with a quick dry feature? These ideas might seem silly at this moment, but these are real triggers which can actually lead to innovation. Or can we actually create or design a floor cleaning solution which will help the floor not have any footprints or foot marks later? So there are multiple such observations from everyday life, like you'll always find a warm seat when you go next to a public toilet if someone has just left. So how do you deal with that? Can we design a better solution for this? Or as I said, can we design a better user interface where people can easily interact with the menus and choose whatever they wish to? So all this while I realized that these triggers of imagination can actually help a lot of people to trigger innovative ideas. So I decided to compile them into a book, which I called I Didn't Say It. And it's a very interesting way of actually triggering the thoughts for people around me. And I'm glad to say that in a couple of months, it has reached to 200 plus destinations across the country. And it is also part of the prestigious knowledge management center of my alma mater, which is NID Ahmedabad, from where it all started. And so I'll leave you with a thought that observation is actually a superpower. If you observe with empathy, with curiosity, with all your senses, with patience, and without distortion. Thank you.